After a terrifying encounter with a demonic entity in the woods outside of their home, two brothers find themselves under attack by dark and malevolent forces. With no place of refuge from torment, not even their own home, will they escape the wrath of a real-life nightmare they have unearthed, or will the darkness take them? This is the untold story of the demonic shadowman case that was experienced by brothers Tom and Tim Yancey. With the majority of my audience not being subscribed, please consider subscribing with notifications on, liking the video, and leaving a comment, as well as checking out one of hundreds of videos available on my channel. Thank you. Lake Worth, Florida, founded in 1913, the city plays home to the arts, boasting festivals, boutiques, music venues, and a historic theater. But amongst the songs, paintings, and acting, it is also the home to something evil that lurks just beneath the surface. In the late 1960s, the Yancey family called Lake Worth their home. Living near the mostly underdeveloped southern woods in the town at that time, brothers Tim and Tom, along with their father Sonny and mother Barbara, up until this point, had lived a rather quiet life. Tim would describe his childhood home as a very peaceful and remote place to live. It was fairly isolated and in the middle of nowhere. His mother Barbara was a beacon of light and joy, a woman who always had a diamond smile upon her face. His father was a stern man, a battle-hardened Korean War veteran who then worked as a carpenter doing construction. Sonny suffered from PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, as a result of the war, and according to Barbara, was a totally different person when he came back. He had been a sergeant in charge of a mortar platoon during the war, and would very rarely speak of what had happened. Although both of the brothers later would recall that he told them a few different stories of his time there. One story that following a battle, he had to arrange for mass graves to be dug and for bulldozers to lay the dead to rest. While suffering with PTSD, Sonny tended to have a short fuse on his temper, but for some reason, this particular summer, it seemed to get inexplicably worse. Where the family lived was remote and surrounded by lush woods, and prior to being settled, the land where the house now stood had been heavily utilized during the slave trade, as well as being the home to numerous bouts of violence between warring Native American tribes. So with the combinations of the terrors of war and those experiencing persecution, over the years, these heavy emotions seemed to leak into the earth, and the woods in and of themselves seemed to become a beacon for darkness, almost as if the black hearts of those who perpetrated the acts still rested beneath the leaves, sticks, and stones of the forest floor. Playing together as brothers often do, Tim and Tom would spend much time within those very same woods, bonding, exploring, and having a great time. Sonny had built a fort for the boys to enhance their time spent out there, and at this time, Tom was 12 years old and Tim was 7. One chilly fall day, as Tom ventured into the woods alone, as he approached the fort, he began to get an eerie feeling, as if someone or something was watching him. With his inner voice screaming, he bolted and ran inside the fort. As he peered through the openings in between the various boards and peeking past the cloth-covered windows, at first he saw nothing but as his heart began to subside from beating out of his chest, he began to hear the crunching of crisp autumn leaves around him. And through the darkness of the boards, he sees a silhouette of a creature. Although the figure appears man-like, something tells him that it's not of this world. Tom, doing the sensible thing, runs for his life, leaving the fort behind. Terrified at what he had just experienced, he decides to not tell anyone about what had happened. As Tom ventures back to the house, disturbed by what he had been through, Tim had entered through another path in the woods, blissfully unaware of his brother's plight. As the boy walks the crispy path of dried leaves, he too begins to feel as if he's being watched. Then in front of him, up in a tree, he sees something strange, something out of place. There in the tree, with the environment reacting around it, there appears to be some kind of creature, but this creature is either see-through or it's reflecting its surroundings, almost like a freakish distortion of reality, perhaps something that shouldn't have been within the confines of our reality. As his eyes grow larger with fear, this entity begins to make its way down the tree and then lands in front of him, mere feet away from the boy, hitting the ground with a loud thud. This is enough to truly frighten the young man, and he too, similar to his brother, decides to run for the house, the one place a child should feel safe to be. Tim frantically makes his way out of the woods and quickly into the arms of his mother, who was near the front door of their house. After explaining things as best as he could, Barbara calms him with the love only a mother can provide, asking him to calm down. She tried her best to convince him that it was perhaps an animal that he had startled, and that things would be okay. And although she did what she could, as we'll come to see, this would be far from what would take place. The brothers in due time would discuss the strangeness of their experiences in the woods with one another, confiding in each other, and trying to make sense of just what this thing or what these things were. Fearing that even talking about it could prompt a visit, the boys did their best to move on and shift their focus to other activities, fearing that if they spoke of it, they would invoke the wrath of what they began to call the shadowman. During the day, things seemed to regain a small amount of normalcy, but at night, the brothers began to see the very same figure outside, usually near the tree line, presenting a thick, man-like shadow, always watching and lurking like a wild animal stalking its prey. One night, as the moon peeks through the clouds overhead, Tim is jolted awake out of a sound sleep. With his eyes opening and slowly adjusting to the darkness of his room, he tries to make sense as to why he was suddenly woke up. As he glances towards his window, with the faintest amount of moonlight illuminating the room, he sees a shadow go past. Scared, but getting up to investigate, he reluctantly looks, and he sees nothing. Thinking that perhaps his mind is playing tricks on him, Tim lays his head back down to try and sleep again. But as he gets comfortable, right before he closes his eyes, he again sees this menacing shadow pass by his window. Attempting to wake up his brother, but unable to do so, he once again gathers the courage to take a look through the window. Peering around their yard and towards the tree line, there in the mists emanating from the woods, he sees the shadowy outline of a man. And this man appears to be staring directly into his soul from afar. It then suddenly begins to rush towards him. Absolutely petrified with fear, the young man lets out a blood-curdling scream. His brother quickly wakes up, and so do his parents. With Sonny being the first inside the room, he asks just what is happening. After being told by Tim that there was a man in the yard, he quickly grabs a flashlight and begins sweeping the property. He ultimately would find nothing. Several weeks later, as the boys slept in their room, 12-year-old Tom starts acting strangely. Waking up to the sound of footsteps, Tim sees his brother in the middle of their room. As he calls out to him, he receives no response, and Tom then begins to walk and leave their room. Calling out to their parents as well as his brother, Tim continues to follow him as he descends the stairs, headed towards their front door. With Sonny and Barbara rushing close behind him, they watch as Tom heads out of the front door and into the yard. As Tim would describe it later, it was as if he was being called out to something, or there was something drawing him into those woods. It was very frightening for me, because I knew there was something out there, and I didn't understand why this was all happening. Sonny is able to wake the boy up as the four stand in the yard. Tom seemed to have been sleepwalking, unaware of what was taking place. Although this hadn't happened previously, and was completely new to the family, this incident would be far from the last. For the next several weeks, Tom would continue to sleepwalk. At times, with other members of the family unaware that he was missing, Tom would find himself waking up next to the lake, out in those foreboding woods. To try and keep the boy from sleepwalking, his parents began to implement measures to keep him from leaving the house. Frustrated, and understandably so, having to get up late into the night, what soon became night after night, with Tom often able to maneuver his way out of locked rooms, they took to stacking chairs in front of the boy's room, in hopes that this would prevent Tom from escaping and potentially hurting himself under one of his spells. Later that night, after the family had gone to bed, Tom took to waking up as per usual. As he aimlessly tries to unlock the door to their room, he wakes up Tim. Fearing that his brother would wake up their father, he tries to get him to wake up and realize just what he's doing. And while this is taking place, the closet door directly across the room from Tom begins to shudder, and then it opens by itself. Then, as if he was being controlled like a marionette puppet, Tom would turn around, face the closet, and then walk inside. Then, with the boy inside, the door would shut behind him, once again seemingly by itself, as if it were operated by unseen hands. Tim, scared but also transfixed on what was taking place, began to hear a conversation. He heard his brother speaking, then he heard another voice, a low, gravelly, deep voice. This frightens the young Tim so bad that despite his fear of his father, he calls out to his parents for protection, and thankfully, his parents heed the call. As they rush to push the chairs aside, they finally do, and then throw the door open to find out just what had happened now. Tim, pointing to the closet, indicates that Tom is inside. Heading to the closet door and opening it, they find the boy sat down inside now, apparently awake. Upon asking him just what was going on, all Tom could say was that there was a man in here. In later interviews, Tom would say that he remembers waking up inside the darkness of the closet to the voice of a man, and then upon speaking with him, towards the back of the closet, he saw two red eyes staring back at him. Despite knowing of their son's sleepwalking, his parents tried to argue that he was clearly messing around in the closet, possibly playing with toys, and they then scolded both of the boys for waking them up, yet again. In the weeks to come, as their parents grow increasingly angry, the Yancey brothers continue to experience the abyssal force that they have come to refer to as the shadowman. One night, the entity seems to find a new way of terrorizing the brothers. Tim has suddenly woken up when he begins to feel small things hit his comforter and mattress. Feeling where the objects had fallen, his hands discover rocks like small pebbles, and thinking it was his brother messing with him, He asked him to stop, and then laid his head back down onto his pillow. And then more of them started falling, pelting the blanket that covered him. He now knows for certain it is not Tom, because he's looking directly at him, and he is fast asleep. As the rocks continue falling onto him, he then discovers leaves, and then pine cones as well. Then he feels something drop onto his head, and this something begins to crawl. Prying off whatever this thing was and throwing it, the boy begins to scream. Barbara soon comes to his aid, and upon turning on the lights, she too finds the stones, pine cones, leaves, and to her surprise, giant Florida cockroaches. It was as if the shadowman was bringing in things from the woods, but for what reason remained unclear. It was with this incident that Barbara began to notice that perhaps it wasn't just the boy's imaginations at work. Perhaps there was something terrorizing them. In the weeks that followed this incident, Barbara too begins to notice the ever-growing hostile environment within the home, and soon begins to seek answers from any and all sources. While her husband is at work and her children are at school, she purchases a Ouija board, and upon returning home, places it on the coffee table in the living room. Not being into the occult previously, she doesn't really know what she's doing, but wants to do her best to communicate with whatever could be there, and to try and seek answers as to why it was tormenting her family. She tries to make contact, but doesn't receive any answers. Later that day, the family retires to their beds to catch some sleep. Little did they know of Barbara's attempts to contact the other side, and little did they know that hell was about to be unleashed upon them. As everyone drifts off to dreamland, Tim once again finds himself being woken up out of a dead sleep. Perhaps it was his intuition. It's hard to know for sure why. But as he wakes up and sits up in his bed, he sees a dark hand emerge from the closet in their room. As the familiar fear grips him, he gets up and shakes his brother Tom awake. And to Tom's disbelief, as he looks ahead where his brother is pointing, he too sees the hand. And then a more fuller figure begins to emerge from the closet opening. Before both of their eyes, a shadowy figure emerges, casting itself onto the wall, with glowing red eyes staring at them. It begins to climb horizontally on the wall towards them. With the brothers absolutely shaken to their core, they scream for their parents as the figure dissipates, as if it was never there. The two then rush out of their bedroom and run up to their parents' bedroom. And although apprehensive because of their father, they would rather deal with his wrath than that of the shadow man. Doing a knock and then opening their door, Tim leads the boys and calls out to their parents. He tells them that the man was back and that he was on their wall like a fly. This bizarre statement from his son and the continuous lack of sleep prompts Sonny to explode. He tells the boys that there is no man, that they're dealing with the boogeyman, and that the boogeyman does bad things to bad kids, and if they were good, he would simply just go away. With tears in his eyes, Tim and his brother would make their way back to their bedroom. Tim would later recall, this notion that I was a bad kid, that I had done something wrong, and that something had come to punish me for my misdeeds, is something that has stuck with me my entire life. I didn't know what I had done to deserve this. From that point on, the boys keep silent about the nightmare experiences that they had had with the entity known to them as the Shadow Man. But the entity seems to grow ever stronger. But even though they have been silent, the rage that dwells within their father, Sonny, also continues to grow. Tim later again would say, he seemed to not understand what was happening in the house, and this led to a lot of family dysfunction. Whether this attracted whatever this thing was to us, or it fed off of the negative emotions or whatever, there was some kind of connection there. These entities seem to do this, and it's like a coupling. The entity attaches itself to a family and then continues to cause problems and seems to derive energy from this. As time passes, the boys find themselves awake on the night of Christmas Eve. Being rambunctious kids as some of us were, they decided to sneak downstairs to take a peek at some of their Christmas presents under the family tree in the living room. The boys seemed to be successful, not alerting their parents to their sneaky endeavors downstairs, when suddenly, loud booming knocks began to come from upstairs. Trying to figure out what could be causing it, they realized that they seemed to be originating from their room. Downstairs upon their mantel next to the tree, their mother had set up a nativity scene showing Mary, Joseph, and baby Jesus. As the banging intensifies further, the scene begins to shake and move. It then drops to the floor, shattering the porcelain figures. The breaking only adding to the cacophony of sound, now reverberating all throughout the house. Then the heavy footsteps of their father cuts through the noise. As he descends the stairs, the boys are trapped. He is pissed, and then he finds the shattered porcelain figures, and this further enrages him. As he interrogates the boys as to what they could have been doing, the boys deny causing the sounds or breaking the figures, but this too only serves to deepen his rage. Since the boys, quote, wanted to stay up, they could do so outside. Using a scare tactic, he marches the boys outside and into the yard, right near the tree line of the forest. He tells them that he was going to get a good night's sleep, and they were to stay outside all night. Little does he know, he has inadvertently delivered his sons into the arms of perdition. The air is cold and bites at their skin as a large moon hovers above them, and the low rustle of leaves surround them. The two young men, despite their best efforts to comfort one another, are absolutely paralyzed with fear as they stand in the darkness of the night. They both suddenly hear the crunching of leaves from behind them. Upon turning around, they are besieged by the shadowman yet again. Screaming for their mother as they run up to their deck, they beg to be let back into the house. Finally, their mother is woke up and forces their father to come with her and let the boys back in, finding the punishment to be cruel, especially since she knows herself that there are things at work that none of them understand. Tim would later say this when interviewed: "My father's anger continued to grow, and he became increasingly frustrated. He would blame the noises on us, and his punishments were severe. The goal of this monster seemed to be to create more anger, more chaos, and more depression within our family." The situation grew bleaker day after day. And on a cold and stormy night, as Tim laid in his bed, he was all too familiarly woken up, without warning. This time, however, something was different. His sheets and blankets were pulled from him. And as Tim would later say, "You know something's there. It's in the room with you, and you've got to reach down and pull those sheets back up." The boy reaches down to do just that, peering down as he grabs them off the floor. He thankfully doesn't see anything. Pulling them back over himself, now laying back down, he once again tries to get comfortable to sleep. As he starts to drift off, he then feels a sharp, searing pain on the right side of his ribs. Feeling this pain, his eyes pop open to find what appears to be a long, bony hand coming from underneath his sheets. Scared for his life, the boy screeches and runs as fast as his legs will carry him. But being this scared, he had his blinders on because he ran directly into the door that was locked to try and prevent his brother from sleepwalking and ultimately leaving the house. He smacks into the door with a visceral crack, screaming in pain and crashing to the ground. This prompted the attention of his parents, who came into the room to discover their son writhing in agony. They would quickly rush him to the hospital, and it would turn out that Tim had broken both of his collarbones. Following this event, as the months turned to years, things from here did not get any better for the Yancey family. Tom, being the oldest, when he became old enough, left the house as quickly as he could, no longer able to deal with the dark forces that dwelled there. Tim, Sonny, and Barbara would not see him for years. Details past this point are practically non-existent, but I will do my best to bring a conclusion to this very haunting case based on what I could find. Over the next 30 years, Tom would play college football and then become a career firefighter. Tim, given all the experiences he experienced before and after his brother left, would become a paranormal investigator and a park ranger. Drifting apart as people do, they wouldn't reconnect until after their parents were gone. Sonny and Barbara had continued to live at the same house the two had grown up in and had had all of their shadowman experiences. When the brothers inherited the house, they came back together to decide just what to do with it. Tom, who had done practically everything to never return to the house, would later recall that he had a sickening feeling in the pit of his stomach upon entering the house again, saying that it was just an evil, sickening feeling. As the brothers discussed things, it would become apparent that Tim wanted to move back into the home with his wife and reclaim it. So after working out a deal amongst themselves, that's exactly what Tim did. And by moving back in, he intended to cleanse the home, to rid themselves once and for all of this ominous presence that had caused them so much pain, the entity they knew as the Shadowman. Prior to moving in, Tim would reach out to his friend Roy Hall, who had dealt with violent hauntings for many years, to help him perform a cleansing ritual of the home. Roy believed that the entity was demonic in nature and haunted the family because Tim's father was abusive. Sonny, who was a Korean War veteran, probably saw a good amount of the horrors of war. He believed that because of Sonny's PTSD, that perhaps the entity had been attached to the land and had seen this and exploited these problems as an entry into their lives, where it continued to wreak havoc upon all of them. As Roy would say in later interviews, these entities seek to cause further dysfunction. They feed upon it. The two men on a rainy and dreary afternoon would step into the home together. Roy would begin to pick up on the ominous, thick atmosphere almost immediately. Lighting incense and beginning various prayers, the two men go from room to room, cleansing. As they walk throughout the house, they sense that the presence is strongest in Tim and Tom's old room, calling out to God to cleanse the house of all evil and negativity. The process took about an hour, but following it, the energy in the house seemed to be rid once and for all of the Shadowman. Tim recalled that things felt different. They felt much lighter, as if we had displaced the negative energy within the home. In August of 2009, Tim, his wife Trish, and son Gabriel all moved into the Lakewood, Florida home. Although they never experienced anything to the degree the boys did while growing up within it, there still seemed to be an undercurrent of evil just right below the surface. In closing, It is believed that the dysfunction of the Yancey household was more than likely far worse than what the sons portrayed publicly, but to what extent, I'm not sure. I did my best to dig as deep as I could, and I believe Tim and Tom are both still alive, with Tim still being a consultant to various paranormal groups across the country. I did want to say that their story was a terrifying and a harrowing one, and although somewhat anticlimactic in the end, as we know here on this channel, things don't always work out the way we want them to, and cases don't always have some kind of ultimate showdown. But a few questions I was left with after researching this case were, just what was the shadowman? Was it a demon? Did it exploit the vulnerabilities of the family, particularly Sonny, in order to create a feedback loop of negativity in which it could enrich itself with? And although from the outside looking in, those that are still with us who were involved seem to be doing okay, but just how has surviving the haunting affected these two men on a daily basis? Do they still think about it, as I occasionally do with my own experiences? All questions I may never have answers for, but one thing is certain. There was something evil that stalked the woodlands surrounding the Yancey home. Something stalking like a predator, seeking prey. And although things seem to be dormant for now, these malevolent entities may still be watching and lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for the moment to strike. Don't let their victim be you. Thank you guys so much for watching this new video. Please let me know what you thought down in the comments below, and if you have any particular cases that you'd like me to research and cover, let me know. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe with notifications on, and consider checking out the YouTube membership program and/or supporting me on Patreon. Or if you'd prefer to have something cool and in your hands and want to help support the channel as well, consider purchasing my book, Stories from the Archives Volume 1, from either my Shopify store or Amazon. Other than that, guys, numbers are still down, but we are very slowly but surely on the way back up as far as I can tell. So to everyone who has supported me and the channel and has been regularly watching, interacting, and sharing, thank you guys so much. You're all the best. Anyways, guys, new and limited merchandise will be coming your way very soon, and I appreciate each and every one of you. This has been Cody here at Mystery Archives. Remember to please stay safe out there, and take care. I'll see you next time.